אוקיי, אז ערב טוב לכולם, צהריים טובים, בוקר
Good
טוב.
evening, everybody.
שמי אופיר גוטלזון מ-Unacceptable.
Good morning.
למי
My
שלא
name
מכיר,
is Ophir Guldason of
בפאלו אלטו
Unacceptable.
בקליפורניה.
I'm
Unacceptable
in Palo Alto,
בקצרה
California.
זה התנועה בחו"ל של ישראלים ויהודים
Unacceptable is
אמריקאים
the overseas
שהמטרה
movement
שלה
of
היא לשמור על
Israelis
ישראל
and
יהודית
Jews
דמוקרטית
with the
ושוחרת
goal
שלום
of
על פי
preserving
מגילת
a
העצמאות.
Jewish Israel
אנחנו מאוד מאוד שמחים
state
היום לארח
in the spirit of
אורלי
Declaration of
בר-לב,
Independence.
עיתונאית עצמאית במימון
We're very happy to
הציבור.
host
אנחנו
Oli
נשים לכם
Bar-Lev,
לינק
an independent journalist.
תגובה, אני גם אספר יותר על אורלי.
We'll send the
אז אורלי,
support
שמח
link
שאת פה
in a
איתנו.
moment.
אהלן.
ואני רוצה,
Oli, it's
אהלן
great that
אהלן,
you're here with
ואני
us.
רוצה רק
Hi.
לתת איזו סקירה קצרה על איפה אנחנו נמצאים, מה אנחנו עושים.
Just want to give a quick
נספר
overview
לכם
of
קצת על
where we
השנה
are and what we're
ב-2020,
doing.
כשעוד הכל היה
Just to tell about
נורא תיאורטי,
Unacceptable in
והסיבות בישראל
2020,
כתוצאה מראש
when
הממשלה
everything seemed
שבנט בלי
theoretical, we saw the
אנחנו
immediate danger.
האנשים
Person indicted
שיצאו
in criminal
לבלפור,
cases might not
גם
serve
אנחנו
as
יצאנו
prime
איתם,
minister. We supported the
התרענו,
people
יצאנו
going out to
ברחובות,
demonstrate at Balfour,
במחאה, ואמרנו ששלטון
went out
החוק
on the
זה
streets, we
קו
built a
אדום,
community.
דמוקרטיה לא מוותרים עליה,
We said that
לצערנו
rule of
המשיך
law is a
הלאה,
red line,
לאן זה יכול
that we have
להתפתח,
to
עוד נדבר על זה.
protect democracy. Unfortunately, none of us
והערב,
expected it
פה
to
בצהריים
decline to
של
the
המועד
state that it
הזה,
is now.
אנחנו כאן כדי לעשות
And
דבר
now
פשוט אך קריטי,
we're
להבין
here
את
to
המצב
do one
המשפטי,
simple but critical thing,
בסיום
to understand
המלחמה,
the
בהפרת
judicial
החוק.
reality that we're at the end of the war, a
עדיין
ceasefire,
מחפשים, עדיין כמובן מחכים לחללים החטופים.
still trying,
אני שמעתי שיש
still waiting for
יש בתנועה חללים, אני מקווה שהם
the,
באמת
the
יגיעו
deceased
בקרוב.
hostages. I heard that there's something moving with that.
ואנחנו תוך כדי, עדיין תוך כדי מריחת זמן במשפט. לפני שאנחנו צוללים
And
לנושא
still
הזה,
dragging out the
נזכיר
trial.
לכם
Before we dive into that,
יהיה 3
just to remind you that
לרצח
next
רבין,
week
וכן, אנחנו עדיין מתעסקים עם
on
נתניהו
Shabbat, it
ורבין.
will be 30 years
ביום
to the
שבת,
murder
ב-1
of
לאוקטובר,
Rabin.
אנחנו נשדר בשידור חי עם תרגום
And on the
סימולטני
1st of
מהמעצר
November, we
המרכזי
will broadcast
ל-30
live
שנה, אני אשים את הלינק.
the
זה
main
יהיה 7
ceremony
וחצי שעות
marking
ישראל,
30
ו10
years
וחצי שעות
from Tel Aviv
זמן,
at
ואנחנו
7:30 Israel time, 10:30 Pacific, and
אז
1:30 Eastern in the
בואו
US.
נצלול פנימה.
So let's get into it.
השיחה. אז אורלי, קודם כל, כיף
We'll
לבוא.
start the conversation.
אני
Ole,
מתאר
first
לעצמי
of all,
שרבים
it's
מהאנשים
really great that you're
שעוקבים
here.
אחרייך.
I'm sure that many people here follow you.
מצב שמאוד מסובך,
We're in
גם
a
מבחינה משפטית, גם מבחינה
situation that is
מדינתית,
quite
ביחד.
complex
הפעם מישהו אמר לי שב-24
legally
שבועות,
and in terms of the state.
החדשות בישראל זה 24 שבועות במקומות אחרים בעולם. אז אנחנו במרכז...
Someone said that 24 hours of news is like 24 weeks anywhere else.
רק להגיד, מי שעוקב אחרי אורלי, כמונו כבר 5 שנים, אז...
Those who follow Ole for 5 years see you everywhere. In the 2 years, especially in the hostages demonstrations, broadcasting live, and an independent journalist, which we'll talk about as well. You also are in every day of the trial of Netanyahu. So Ole, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Ophir, and to all of the friends in Unacceptable, all around the United States, and all of the Israelis and Jews who are fighting with us shoulder to shoulder in America and in Europe, Australia. It's simply, we're in this struggle together for many years, and you, Ophir, that founded this initiative overseas is a force multiplier. We thank you for everything that all of you are doing and the work together to save the state, and especially in the last 2 years to save the hostages. It's not over, as we say. It's just getting worse, but at least the hostages have returned home. Just checking some administrative things with getting people into the Zoom now. If you can't get in here, there's a live broadcast on Orly's Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. Thank you for the technical help of Roy Goldstein. Everything is on those channels. I just wanted to let everyone know that I am covering this trial from the presentation of evidence in 2021, just so we understand that the indictment was presented in 2020 and the presentation started almost a year and a half later. And that is part of what we'll talk about dragging things on. But in the presentation of evidence in the first year and a half, I was in the courtroom from the moment that the change government fell and the government that initiated the judicial coup. I focused on that, but for most of the witnesses in the trial, I documented and covered. And since Netanyahu started on the witness stand in December 2024, almost a year, I'm there every day in the trial. Every time that Netanyahu is there, I'm there. And there are also defense witnesses that are testifying in parallel. I'm also writing it out and then summarizing it every day. And we'll talk about the content of the trial and also the management of the trial and the attempts of Netanyahu to get out of it. Let's dive right into the framework of this. Everyone knows that Netanyahu is on trial. The indictment was presented in January of 2020, and the trial is in the later stages of the testimony of the accused. And we're a year after the movie, The Bibi Files. So I'm just going to kind of give the headlines. We're already in the cross-examination of the defense, where Netanyahu is the accused and the first defense witness. We call this 3 indictments. Really, it's one with 3 different sections. We're already in the part where the prosecution has examined the witnesses, and there was cross-examination by the defense. Now the defense is presenting its witnesses and examined Netanyahu in 37 court sessions, and now there have been 13 more sessions, but sometimes it's just 2 hours, sometimes an hour, half a day, part of a week, but there have been 13 court sessions that were supposed to be full days. And I'm just saying that all of the 48 days took place over 10 and a half months, almost a year, just to see how he's been able to drag out time, because this is intentional. So from above, this is a trial on corruption, government corruption, it's breach of trust, bribery in 1000. It's the connections with financiers and through a supply line of gifts, champagne and cigars and jewelry that, according to the witnesses who we heard already, we're talking about by request, not that the people were giving the gifts, but that these are requests and demands from the accused to get these things. This is with Milchan and Packer. That is file 1000, 2000. It's just getting started. Noni Moses is present. We're just in the cross-examination. This hasn't really been deeply explored. We've looked more at the peripheral witnesses. It's about a conversation between the editor of Yediot Achronot and 2 recordings of conversations in which we hear a conversation of bribery. The prosecutor, the previous prosecutor who put together these files, these accusations, who change it from a bribery to he's not accused of bribery, but Noni Moses is accused of proposing to bribe, of offering bribery. And it's conversation you do for me, I do for you, and it deals with media and interests. Everything having to do with Netanyahu and his need to get coverage that helps him to stay in power and to embed his power. And what he can give to Moses with the power that he has by virtue of his position. Netanyahu says he wasn't part of the conversation around bribery. And then there's 4,000, which is more complicated, which also has to do with bribery, and it is still an accusation of bribery. And here there are a variety of relationships with wealthy people, the Alovich couple and their ownership stake in a media company called Walla. And according to the accusation, it's essentially giving real substantive control over a media organization to get the coverage that helps Netanyahu, whether it's to advance himself or his wife or his family, or to remove negative coverage or things against political opponents that will be covered, or to control which journalists or which editors will be hired and fired. It's not just positive coverage, it's really about control of it. And on the other side, regulatory benefits that he gives to Alovich as the Minister of Communications and Alovich as the controlling shares of Bezeq, the phone company. So this is a more complex case. There have been many witnesses. In the prosecution case, all of this was explored. We saw witnesses from Walla who testified and witnesses who worked with Netanyahu. There was Filber, who was the CEO of the communications ministry, who turned on Netanyahu. We saw all kinds of witnesses who were within the office. And now in the cross-examination, he's already be giving his case on all of those counts. There's a lot that doesn't make sense and contradicts what the other witnesses testified or the fact. And he built himself a whole story that he tells, but in my view, it doesn't match up with the reality or what was proved within the trial. And a lot of things will come up in the cross-examination. Now the cross-examination is focused on the count 1,000. And this week we started about the champagne and cigars. Now we were establishing the relationships with Milchan and what interests he have. These are things that I don't want to get into all of this and how he wanted all of these things in a visa. The interesting things are really starting now. And I'll just add one more sentence. There's a reason that Netanyahu, that we see him increasing his efforts to get out of the trial. And that is because now we're getting to the heart of this count number 1,000, that the public understands, the champagne and the cigars and the supply line of gifts and demands. This is the part that the ability to deny reality puts him in a much less comfortable light. So he is accelerating his efforts to put the brakes on this trial, which he has not been able to do so far. One of the things that Netanyahu always comes back to is that he wants to get the trial done quickly and move it forward. He has nothing to hide. I waited for years for this to come. There won't be anything because there was nothing. Just to try to understand and also understand the ramifications of this trial and his intervention in it. Let's talk about his attempts to evade the trial and specifically what happened this week with the judges. Okay, in a minute we'll just talk about that, but I just want to say one thing from generally. The most influential thing on the state of Israel is Netanyahu's attempt, is his attempt to evade or to get out of the trial. And this led to a whole series of processes that are destructive and catastrophic to the state because Netanyahu does not accept the fact of the trial and defend himself. He tries so many things to try to stop it, to put the brakes on, to slow it. And the state of Israel, the public in Israel, the citizens are paying with lives, paying with the lives of people. Not just Israelis, but Jews in the world. Yes, that also. And the entire state. It's the people, it's everybody who lives here. And in a moment, I'm going to read the list. You understand how deep it is. It's not just a procedural thing, it's something that has changed the trajectory of the state in a historical way for 5 or 6 years now. We'll start all of his attempts to evade. There's procedural, strategic, that influence everything. It starts truly, actually, before what I put down here. The beginning of the beginning of the beginning. Not just to influence Mandelblit and so that he wouldn't bring the cases. He met him without anybody there 100 times when he was the prime minister and the other was the attorney general. These are things that don't usually happen. And from the moment that the indictment is submitted, they delayed, and from the first moment, we saw a strategy to an intentional dragging it out and delaying of the trial. Along that, we saw from the beginning a campaign of mud throwing against against the police, against all of the judicial authorities, against the judges from Netanyahu and all of his representatives, his mouthpieces that tried to dig up dirt on the judges. This has also happened. All kinds of insults and accusations against journalists, against people in the legal system, to basically terrorize everybody who's involved in this. 5 elections because of his attempt to evade his trial. Why did we need so many elections? Because Netanyahu tried to arrange a coalition of escape. Either a coalition that would make him he tried to use the previous iconic Chief Justice. This failed. He started the judicial coup using his people, and they've managed to pass a lot of laws, and every day Israel is less democratic, and we lose every day a new piece of the democracy. It's not Levin's judicial coup, it's Netanyahu's. Netanyahu is doing this in violation of his arrangement for conflict of interest, which allowed him to become prime minister at the same time that he's in the trial. And he said he wouldn't touch the judicial system and wouldn't use his powers of investigation. He's doing that from the prime minister's office. He made sure to like the Roglot committee, which is an attempt to get involved into the trial, even though they say it's general and in the name of justice, but they're trying to interfere with the current trial to stop it and put the brakes on. Firing of the Attorney General, which has partially been stopped. And if that doesn't work, they're trying another arrangement to get rid of her with no reason, no justification. It's all fabricated. Dismissal of the head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. They showed him the door, and Netanyahu wanted to fire him, which happens right after Qatargate, which I'll say something about as well. And Netanyahu also wants a Shin Bet head who'll follow his orders. Reminding you that Ronen Bar, the previous one, gave testimony to the court that Netanyahu had asked him to give an opinion that because of security and the war, Netanyahu could not come to testify. So they fire one in order to get a new one in there who can give opinions in his favor. He started a campaign of to get a pardon from all kinds of directions. Sometimes it's a pardon, sometimes it's cancellation of the trial in all different ways and forms. I want to remind you that we're all watching the President Herzog, and we have to remind that Netanyahu supported his candidacy for president, which was very surprising and weird because they were political rivals. And now we see that Herzog has become so often that we can't count it as a servant of Netanyahu, and who echoes his messages that help him. Herzog promised to defend democracy. It's not happening. It's falling apart. He could barely say anything critical about the hostages. And even asking about pardon, he doesn't say no way. It's illegal because we're before the conviction. We're in the middle of the trial. Something that's never. He doesn't say that. Just to say one important point. He even tried to convince hostages' families to support. It was published a few weeks ago that Herzog talked with hostages' families before the deal, while the hostages are being starved and tortured. He talks with them that they should speak out publicly for a pardon of Netanyahu. It's a mind-blowing event. It's sickening, just sickening. That's the pardon campaign. In addition to that, not only at the strategic level, but on the procedural level, all kinds of delays, cancellations, shortening. The dog ate my homework. I don't feel good. I'm hot. I'm cold. Having all kinds of security people coming to say there are all kinds of things today that he can't testify. This could have been done with some kind of credibility if we didn't see him sell those excuses to the judge and then go do something else. So he says, I've got to go. There's something very important for security. And then he spends the whole week. He's in a public relations campaign going from camera to camera, from event to event, from launch to launch after the war with Iran to make a toast of how we won. Just one important thing to clarify. You can understand that it's hard for a prime minister to be on trial while he's prime minister. If you could talk about the conflict of interest and isolation. Netanyahu committed to 11 Supreme Court justices that he could be both accused on trial and do his job. He's proved to us, Netanyahu's proved to us that he can't do both of them. I've got a meeting here, I've got a meeting there. Even if some of the things are true, if you can't do it, then your promise was empty. You can also resign. You don't have to be the prime minister. You do have to be on trial. And that's the point. He doesn't have to be prime minister. He said, he can, but if you can't, then just move aside. But he can, sort of in a normal world, say, okay, I'm going to take a temporary break. I will complete my trial. I'll give my testimony. I'll give a month, 2, 3, whatever my testimony takes. Someone else will be prime minister, and then I'll come back. Of course, he's not doing those things. He's using his position as prime minister to get out of the trial. He's the only accused with the benefits of a celebrity that anyone has ever gotten. Since when does the defendant decide when he'll be there, when he won't be there? And we'll talk about how the judges have been a little tougher lately. But in my opinion, one of the most shocking things, one of the things that Netanyahu should be tried just on this, Netanyahu used the war to evade his trial. He lengthened the war in Gaza in order that could have been done a year and a half ago, that there were accomplishments and much better conditions to finish the war, not to mention that many of the hostages were still alive. We talked about 44 who died as a result of continuing the war and the military pressure. Those who stayed alive and went through horrible torture. The war was continued. Netanyahu didn't want to end it, not as speculation. He said it himself. And he used the war and he used the hostages and he abandoned them and sacrificed them to maintain a security situation, an emergency situation, so that he could evade the trial and do security consultation here, consultation there. In my opinion, just for that, he needs to be tried, which is 1,000 times worse than all of the criminal things that he's done that we're talking about now in the trial. Next. What other techniques help him to evade the trial? All kinds of witnesses that flip and then got all kinds of cushy jobs from all kinds of organizations that support him, all kinds of ministers and members of Knesset as cheerleaders that come to the trial and yell out, let him go, release him. They delegitimize the trial, say that it shouldn't happen. You're saying it happens within the trial or just as they're going into the courtroom? It happens, first of all, a week or two ago. There was a lot of media outside, but this parade of the members of Knesset and the ministers, each one said their own, kind of sentence. We have to cancel it. We have to shut it down. Enough. There were a lot of things said in order to generate the public conversation. Even just yesterday or the day before, Almog Cohen, a reporter, arrived, and the moment that there was a break, the member of Knesset, he came and said, let him go. He needs to work. There are hostages that have to be saved. And of course, we agreed that they need to be saved and brought back. But there's the use of this in order to say, stop the trial. That the fact that he left them there all that time until now isn't enough. And then we saw what Trump said, that Netanyahu asked him in tweets and in his speech, hey, give him a pardon. Those things that he said, including in tweets, we see how Trump, in his words, shows that he was asked to do it. It wasn't his initiative. Netanyahu is trying to use the situation and Trump to advance all of the talk of canceling the trial. And one thing, because it's connected to what we talked about at the beginning, they're trying to fire the Attorney General. She's all of the jobs together, the Attorney General and the legal advisor to the government. But now in the middle of the trial, and when Netanyahu wants to put the brakes on the trial, when he doesn't succeed to get rid of the Attorney General, he tries to split her job into 3 different roles so that he can put his own attorney general of his own and essentially move his own prosecutor aside and put in someone loyal to him as the attorney general. This is unbridled criminal behavior just to stop his trial. Because of the judicial coup, Israel showed weakness, and we got the October 7th, which has cost us deeply in blood. It's not just 5 elections. It's not just the craziness of the country in 5 and 6 years. We've paid the price in blood. And also that across the fence in Gaza, many, many people have paid in blood for this. And continuation of a war without a purpose. And of course, now we got Qatar and Hamas instead of the more moderate options. Qatar and Turkey, and Hamas is still there. We started with a justified war and we ended up with a political war. One of the things that we would expect that the news would be open up with some sort of update on the trial. It doesn't happen. Once in a while we hear from Guy Peleg, but it almost doesn't happen. Tell us what happens within the court. How's it going on there? How are they behaving? Does he follow what the judges say and the lawyers? Is he respectful or not respectful? So first of all, we'll start with the substance and then what's around it. Every time that the prosecutor, the attorney of Tel Aviv district, very professional, very respectful for the other lawyers and the judges and towards the accused. It doesn't stop the accused from to lash out at the prosecutor every time that he's pushed into a corner, that they try to find a conflict in what he says, or he feels under pressure, or he wants to take a different direction to change the conversation. He goes back to speeches and lashes out at other witnesses, at the media, victimhood, and raising his voice in those moments. We see him try to make the things small and cynical. So that's at the substantive level. In the behavior within the courtroom, he's treated in a way that no accused is treated. He comes in through his own hallway, and like any accused, usually the press can ask a few questions for a couple of minutes. Not only for prime minister, for any defendant there, and every witness comes in through the same entrance. He's the only one that comes from the entrance that doesn't go through a public space, but from some sterile hallway. There's a convoy that arrives, and somehow he gets into the courtroom. There's no exposure to the media. Yesterday in the Knesset, he goes through the Knesset and he's asked questions, and whether he answers or not, he's exposed to it. Here, there's nothing like it. Up to now, we've been asking something that's 40 to 60 seconds. And now Netanyahu complained about it a lot. And there was an attempt to not have this happen. It's an attempt that, from my perspective, I'm not the only one. Many of my colleagues see it as an anti-democratic attempt to shush the media. We're not there because we feel like it. We're there for the public, in the name of the public, for the public's right to know. There's the principle of a trial being a public activity. The press is part of democracy. It's the fourth estate of the democracy. Journalists are there doing a job, and they're trying to prevent us from doing that job. This week we saw Netanyahu. He comes in. We started asking him questions. I personally asked him why he didn't resign, because anyone who was in power in October 7th has resigned, and there were other questions asked of him. And it was noted that he didn't like this. By the way, it's the only place to ask him questions because he doesn't do interviews. And then he said to the representative of the courts, well, we agreed that this wouldn't happen. We agreed that this absurd thing wouldn't happen. And so what's this absurd thing for 40 seconds? In other words, this is the state of mind of a dictator who doesn't have to give answers to the public at all. And actually, the judges decided that I think was unacceptable, that Netanyahu, not only that he will come in with him, but that they'll come in and then he comes afterwards. That's literally what's in the decision, which is unimaginable decision. There's nothing like this where the judges wait for the accused. And now she's saying, maybe the judges will rise when he comes into the courtroom. It's important to remind that Netanyahu for years has not given interviews to the media in Israel other than Channel 14, which is kind of a Fox News, only with his mouthpieces. That's pretty much the only opportunity that journalists have for 30 or 40 seconds to throw out a question to him, just to give the context of how important this is. It's undemocratic what's happening. But from this, we learn that Netanyahu is being treated in a very pleasant manner. There has been a little change in the judges' perspective for a long time. They were very weak, and whatever he said, I've got an itch, I've got a meeting, they said, fine, you can go. That's what it felt like. I need this, I need that, I want to go here, I want to play. The judges, at some point, we could see that they kind of understood what was happening, and that these judges will finish their term another 2 years, and we're 6 years into this, and it's possible that those 2 years will go by, and the defense says we're going to bring witnesses, but in another second, one of these judges is retiring, and the trial won't end. So therefore, the strategy of dragging out, this is another way to stop the trial. And the judges understood there's no choice. And they announced 2 months ago to everyone that starting the beginning of November, on Sunday the 2nd, the trial will be 4 days a week, of which Netanyahu will testify 3 of them. Now he testifies 2. And there will be a 3rd day with a different defense witness. There's also some sort of arrangement to move it along. In any case, there's a discussion about this and all kinds of whining by Netanyahu and his lawyers. We're still in the middle of this, and the decision of the judges, and they brought in all these people, and we heard all of Netanyahu's lawyer that they'll quit, and that it's not possible to force this on us. Now, just in a normal criminal trial, you can't quit without the judge's authorization. And they said, no, you can't force us. There's no force in the world that can force us to continue. We'll even give up we'll freeze our our legal license, our position at the bar, because you can't force us to represent in this way. So there's some sort of move here, some sort of attempt here. There was a decision yesterday indeed, and they stood on with their decision. Next week, the witness is supposed to be on Sunday, won't be there. It's still 3 days next week. Netanyahu is still supposed to testify for 2 days. I'm just saying that the cases where he actually testifies from 9:30 to 4:30, a full day, are very few. There's always something. There's almost always something. So we'll see. But as of now, next week, 3 days, and after that, 4 days. And we'll see if the judges hold to this. And we'll see after the campaign of whining. And if we're talking about the judges, there was an unpleasant event for you and other journalists in terms of violence directed at journalists, which we saw also today in another place. Are you feeling that at the trial? Look, let's just say this week, for the first time actually, I'll take a step back. There are Netanyahu supporters who come to be in the gallery of the trial. Some people who like him, that are emotionally connected to him, it's legitimate. It's the trial's open to the public. There are people who don't like him who come to see the trial. The courtroom is open. That's a principle. The court is of the people, belongs to the people. They can feel one way or another and everything is fine. Sometimes they speak in the breaks and that's all fine. But this week there was an instance where supporters of Netanyahu came and Ben Gvir, and they're friends with a variety of ministers and one who calls himself an activist. There's an intent to intimidate journalists. For me and Aviad Glickman, I'll wait for you outside, I'll wait for you at your car. And there was a moment with the court bailiffs, and they came to get them out. We had to come and say, look what's happening. And then they came and sort of apologized, as if they apologized, but then the same people waited for us outside. I had to get a restraining order today, ask the court for a restraining order so they won't come to harass me in my own name. Is it the same one who harasses the people, the one who comes to other citizens to come and harass journalists when they leave the court? I don't want to focus on this event, but I just want to say that there's an escalation, not just of this small event, but I'm looking at the big picture. That there is an order that was given. Someone told them to come to the court, and I'm repeating, and to connect it to something else that we haven't talked about. Netanyahu is lying on the witness stand. He's in distress because the fact and what the witnesses are saying is different from what he wants to say in order to avoid being convicted. He knows that his legal situation is not good, or he wouldn't lie so much. And what I'm saying is that there's a escalation because Netanyahu feels like his coalition is maybe not holding on, and then there are going to be elections before things, and then he hasn't managed to do all the changes in the government, the legal system before the elections. So he's under pressure. So he's shooting in all directions to somehow cancel the trial. But along the harassment of media, the critical media, to not tell the story of what's really happening. Netanyahu now, we're getting to the age of the big lies, up until now, there are all kinds of lies that came up on the witness stand that was talking about the cross-examination, the things that the journalists came up with when you say, well, as a small site, but all of the time you're chasing them. Apparently, it's not such a small, unimportant site. Or when you say, I never got involved in media, but it doesn't interest me, but then we see these things that you did. So those are contradictions that sort of offend the common sense that the media discovers. But now we're talking about the cross-examination with Milchan's interest, and now we're getting to the champagne and the cigars. And if, for example, we'll see examples from the testimony yesterday that Netanyahu tries to paint a picture of, no, the house of this rich guy, 2 or 3 days after we met, there was already a suggestion from Netanyahu to Pekka that he buy the house next door. They barely knew each other. Even Netanyahu said they had met 5 or 6 times. He always says that he's busy. He's prime minister. He's up at 1 in the morning, gets up at 4. When does he have time to meet with friends? That was enough to suggest that he buy the house next door to him. And then he describes how he didn't just come twice, maybe 3. He swam in the pool because there was a heated pool. And one time the air conditioning went, all kinds of stupid excuses. And this contradicts testimony of the cook, of Hadass Klein, which I'll say in every opportunity, Hadass Klein is the most credible witness on earth, coherent, an amazing memory. She repeated them and it all hung together. She says the same things on the witness stand as she said to the police, and it all lines up. And she's just very precise. And her credibility was so great that every journalist who's not a mouthpiece of the poison machine of Bibi saw how credible she is. Not only he. There were other testimonies that showed that this story is correct. And there are receipts and all sorts of things. And against all of this testimony and evidence, Netanyahu tries to deny and say it was just a schnitzel, just a pasta, all kinds of techniques, sort of third grade techniques that hope it doesn't work on most people, like the Bugs Bunny thing. What's the Bugs Bunny story? The story in which Milchan comes up with a little doll, and according to the indictment, Milchan says in his testimony, Sarah asked him to bring a small doll and not a big doll. And he ran around New York, and all of this happened in their first meeting. And then he runs with this little doll, and it was so small that the security guards jumped on him, and there was rain. Netanyahu tries all kinds of techniques to sort of to minimize these things, but there's testimony of the cook about meals, not only in Packer's house when he's not there. The indictment doesn't deal with those things, but deals with the champagne and cigars as a result of the open door and ongoing gifts. There are lies here. And now we're at their core, the juicy part. And that's one of the reasons that Netanyahu is even more stressed, and one of the reasons that we're at this boiling point. And we see how they're trying to sabotage the proper advancement of the trial.
אבל יש שאלה שעולה כמה פעמים גם
There's a
בצ'אט
question
וגם במקומות
here,
אחרים, ואולי יש לך תשובה אליה. בעצם,
and there are questions in the
אם
chat, which
בעצם
we'll
אנחנו
answer.
גם לא מתקדמים במשפט, וגם המדינה
If we're not
מתנהלת כמו שהיא
moving
מתנהלת,
forward in the
יש לך
trial
דלגציה
and
להנהיג
the
את
country's
המדינה, את הביטחון שלה לפחות,
being managed the way it is,
למה בעצם שומרי הסף הקיימים לא מצליחים לעשות עוד איזה פטישן,
how is it that the
עוד
existing
אקדמיים
gatekeepers
ואחרים, בעצם, למה בעצם המשפט לא מוכיח שבעצם נתניהו צריך לצאת לנבצרות? בעצם אין פה,
why doesn't the trial prove that he needs to take a temporary break from the prime minister's office? I don't know. I really don't know. He's given so many reasons that he should be temporarily removed for many reasons, not only because he broke his conflict of interest agreement in a brutal way, but also because he's breaking the country apart. It's not just a slogan. I don't know. I assume there are all kinds of calculations. People do calculations. How will it happen? What would happen? How will the Supreme Court react? I assume there are all kinds of attempts. I don't know. There's no question that it's a step that hasn't been taken, and it's a step that is dramatic. But maybe there's something that it's something that will be even more chaotic, but it's chaotic in any case, and they're making the chaos worse. And it will only get worse ahead of the elections. And one of the tactics, just like their tactics to sabotage the trial by dragging it on, another tactic is to increase the chaos, to sabotage the elections, and to enshrine their power. And if you create chaos, what's the response to chaos? Let's stabilize things. It says we know the chaos on this side of the ocean as well. And here, you present yourself as the savior of the problem that you yourself created. I don't know how to answer that question, but I personally think that should have happened from a long time ago. And I think that it's still a tool in the toolbox, and it's not too late to use it. So I think this should have been used long ago. And we see, I remember myself writing that the Attorney General, when Onan Bar was the head of the Shin Bet, now we have a very different one, and there aren't enough exclamation points for that. And I said, do it now to save the country using all of the legal tools and the democratic tools, but do it before it's too late. I said that this tool still exists and it's not too late, but it is late. I want to add and would like to hear what you think. The discredibility of the courts that's bringing to the judicial coup. We didn't pay attention to Qatargate and the Commission of Inquiry, all the things that require a majority of the people. That essentially all these things are in there because Netanyahu is trying to evade a conviction. There are all kinds of examples where Netanyahu has spoken to other accused officials like Olmert or Lieberman about how they need to resign from office. This conversation about the trial, the small and the big, in conclusion, I want to bring up this subject and ask you, how do we get out of this mess? Does the judicial system have credibility in Israel, or are we in a situation of anarchy? So let me, in half sense, address what you said. First of all, Netanyahu has evaded not only his trial, but from Qatargate and from a commission of inquiry. And he is running a campaign against the judicial branch to erode the faith in it. He didn't do that until there were investigations of him. Before that, when he was prime minister and there were no investigations of him, and there were all kinds of extremism on the right who tried to change and weaken the judicial branch, he stood firm to keep it between division of independent branches of government with an independent judiciary. That went kaput as soon as there were investigations against him. But there is his trial and Qatargate, and the Commission of Inquiry, and the person who's supposed to nominate the members are the Chief Justice. So this also riles up the base, because like any populist leader, you need an enemy. And if you don't have an enemy, you create one. The fact that there could be problems with the judicial system, of course, there are lots of problems in any system, but there's a demonization against the judicial system. And if real reform would improve the system to the citizens and not destroy the judicial system and give unrestrained power to the executive branch, you're right in connecting these things. Is there credibility? It depends who you ask, because they've shaken faith in the system and it's gone down. But faith in the government and the executive branch is below the floor. But the faith in the judicial system, who are you to say that? No one's believing what you say. The people don't support you. They don't believe you. You're acting since this October 7th, not to mention the judicial coup before that. The government lost its majority of support in the polls, and since October 7th, times a million times, now we're in a situation where the government has the least faith, the least confidence. There's a lot more confidence in the courts and in other parts of the government that Netanyahu tried to delegitimize, the IDF, the chief of staff, and others, the pilots, whatnot. So we saw in all of the surveys of confidence, the public believes has confidence in all of the other bodies more than in the government. What has to happen? First of all, we need strong, brave gatekeepers that do their job. What needs to happen are elections as soon as possible, blocking all of the initiatives that started and are going to start to change election law and the rules of the game, because they know that if they do fair and free elections, they don't win. They don't have a government. They don't have control. I don't know if it's true. The polls show that maybe there's a block that they can block starting a government, forming a government. There's a delegitimization campaign against the Arab sector to cooperate with it or not. Things that aren't even justified. Netanyahu controls the conversation, tries to push narratives. And unfortunately, the opposition, for the most part, even though there are a few points of light, for the most part, the opposition is weak, hasn't learned what you do against fascists. Even the World Zionist Organization, they made some sort of deal with the Likud, and then woke up to find out that in through the back door came Yair Netanyahu to get a job. You open the news and you say, seriously? You made a deal with with these terrible people. What did you think would happen when you made a deal with a fascist and destroyers of the country? What did you think would happen?
איזושהי תודעה שהיא נמצאת בה ולעבור למוד חירום ולארגן לעצמה כלים שהיא לא השתמשה בהם עד היום. אז יש מה לעשות בתחום הזה, והציבור צריך להיות...
They need to use tools that have not been used, and the public has to be aware, and the public's going to have to work hard. Everything connected to the public conversation, help people to understand what's happening. There's an attempt to blame October 7th on everybody except the one on whose watch it happened and who funded Hamas and did the judicial coup and sent the millions of dollars in suitcases. They're trying to blame the protest movement on Kaplan, all kinds of lies. Every citizen for whom the state is important and whose kids will have a good home, and profitable and liberal and thriving with rule of law to raise their kids, it's now or never. As much as we thought that the previous elections were fateful, they were fateful, and we've had these terrible catastrophes, but we didn't want to be right. Now it seems that we've gone up a step with how fateful the elections are, and we're going to have to fight to the end in a legal, democratic, nonviolent way. We're going to conclude. I just want to remind everyone, we put the link in the chat to support independent journalism, because even the media, which we won't get into, will say people who a respected journalist turns out that he did not fully disclose that he's receiving money from one of the accused in Qatar Gate, et cetera, et cetera. So whoever can support independent journalists in a one-time or a repeating contribution, I work only for the public as a representative of the public, thanks to you. Anything I do is thanks to you, whether it's for the hostages' families for the last 2 years, the struggle against the judicial coup, for democracy, everything, money in politics over the last few years, and the trial now. It's all work with the public and for the public, and I couldn't do it without the public and your help. Ole, just want to say thanks so much and remind everyone to join us on Shabbat for the 30th anniversary of Rabin's murder, and we will be broadcasting it live with translation. Thank you to Shimrit and David, Nothina and Janet, who translated to Spanish. I want to say, everyone, we have a lot to do. We've put in the chat who can help with the elections, something that we want to see what we can do from here. And that's it. And we'll see you Shabbat in the morning. Thank you all. And Oli, continue to broadcast us. We appreciate you. Thank you, Ophir. Thank you, all the friends. Well, victorious together, but for real.